Isabella Montgomery had never touched a dirty dish in her 19 years of life. She lived in a sprawling mansion on the hills of Beverly Hills, where crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors that sparkled under the California sun. Her father, Richard Montgomery, owned a chain of luxury hotels across the country, and her mother, Victoria, spent her days organizing charity galas that raised more money for designer gowns than actual causes. Every morning, Isabella woke, up in her king-sized bed draped with silk sheets imported from Italy. Maria, the head housekeeper, would bring her breakfast on a silver tray, while Isabella scrolled through social media on her diamond-encrusted phone. She never bothered to say thank you. In her world, people existed to serve her, and gratitude was something she had never learned to express. The walk-in closet in Isabella's room was larger than most people's bedrooms. Designer bags worth thousands of dollars hung from custom shelves, while shoes from Paris, Milan, and New York filled every available space. She changed outfits 3 times a day, leaving expensive clothes scattered across her room for the housekeeping staff to clean up. When friends came over, they would gasp at her collection, but Isabella barely noticed their amazement. To her, this was simply normal life. School was merely a social playground for Isabella. She attended an exclusive private academy where most students came from wealthy families, but even among them, she stood out for her extravagance. She arrived each day in a different luxury car from her father's collection, sometimes the red Ferrari, other times the white Lamborghini. Her designer uniforms were tailored to perfection, and she carried handbags that cost more than teacher salaries. During lunch breaks, Isabella held court at the best table in the cafeteria, surrounded by friends who laughed at her every word and agreed with her every opinion. She never questioned whether their friendship was genuine or simply bought with expensive gifts and exclusive party invitations. When classmates couldn't afford the latest gadgets or designer items, Isabella would make cutting remarks about their poor taste without considering how her words might hurt. Teachers treated Isabella with a mixture of respect and frustration. Her father's donations to the school ensured that her grades remained acceptable, even when her effort didn't match. She rarely completed assignments on time, often claiming she was too busy with social events to focus on trivial schoolwork. When consequences were mentioned, Isabella would casually mention her father's influence, and problems would mysteriously disappear. At home, Isabella's demands were endless and immediate. She wanted her room redecorated monthly, her car detailed weekly, and her wardrobe updated with every fashion season. The household staff moved around her like a well-orchestrated dance, anticipating her needs before she even voiced them. If her coffee wasn't the perfect temperature, she would send it back with a dramatic sigh. If her bath wasn't drawn exactly as she liked it, she would call for Maria to fix it immediately. Her parents, busy with their own social obligations and business ventures, showed their love through expensive gifts rather than time or attention. When Isabella wanted to spend a weekend in Paris because she was bored, her father would arrange for the private jet without question. When she decided she needed a new car because her current one was so last season, her mother would take her shopping at the most exclusive dealerships. The family's dinner conversations revolved around business deals, stock prices, and upcoming social events. Isabella contributed little to these discussions, preferring to complain about minor inconveniences in her day or demand approval for her latest expensive purchase. Her parents nodded along, their attention often divided between their daughter and their constantly buzzing phones. Isabella's social calendar was packed with exclusive events, charity balls, and private parties at other wealthy families' estates. She moved through these gatherings like a princess, expecting others to accommodate her schedule and preferences. When event planners called to confirm details, Isabella would make last-minute changes that required extensive rearrangements. Never, considering the extra work her whims created for others. The house itself reflected the family's wealth and Isabella's influence. Her wing of the mansion included not just her bedroom and closet, but also a private sitting room, a personal gym that she never used, and a bathroom with a marble bathtub large enough for 3 people. Fresh flowers were delivered and arranged in her rooms twice weekly, and her personal assistant kept detailed notes about her preferences for everything from room temperature to pillow firmness. Shopping was Isabella's favorite pastime, though. She rarely shopped alone. A small entourage usually accompanied her, including her personal assistant, a security guard, and often a few friends who served as an audience for her purchases. Store managers would close entire sections to accommodate her private shopping sessions, while salespeople competed for her attention with elaborate presentations of the latest merchandise. Despite having everything money could buy, Isabella often felt a strange emptiness that she couldn't quite identify. She filled this void with more purchases, more parties, and more demands on those around her. She had never learned to find satisfaction in simple pleasures or to appreciate what she already possessed. Her world was built on excess, and she couldn't imagine any other way of living. As autumn approached, Isabella was already planning her elaborate Christmas wish list and discussing with her parents the possibility of spending the holidays in Switzerland. She had no idea that her comfortable, predictable world was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The foundation of her privileged life was less stable than she believed, and soon she would discover just how quickly fortune could shift. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning, when Isabella noticed her father pacing frantically in his study, speaking in hushed, urgent tones on his phone. She dismissed it as another boring business matter and continued planning her outfit for that evening's gallery opening. The second sign appeared when her mother canceled their scheduled spa appointment, claiming she had important meetings to attend. Isabella felt annoyed but not alarmed. Her parents often had mysterious, adult responsibilities that interrupted her plans. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the house had shifted noticeably. The usually cheerful household staff moved with nervous energy, whispering among themselves and avoiding eye contact with family members. Isabella's personal assistant seemed distracted during their morning scheduling session, fumbling with dates and double-booking appointments. When Isabella snapped at her for the confusion, the woman's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly apologized and promised to be more careful. The family's evening dinner, usually a calm affair with polite conversation about social events, became tense and uncomfortable. Her father sat rigid in his chair, barely touching his food while scrolling through emails on his phone. Her mother picked at her salad, her usual animated chatter replaced by worried silence. Isabella, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, complained loudly about a classmate who had worn the same designer dress to 2 different events. Friday morning brought the devastating news that would shatter Isabella's world forever. Her father's business empire, built over 20 years, had collapsed virtually overnight due to a massive fraud scandal involving his business partner. Federal investigators had frozen all company assets, and criminal charges were being filed. The family's personal accounts were seized as part of the investigation, leaving them with almost nothing. The mansion would be sold to pay creditors, and their luxurious lifestyle was about to disappear completely. Isabella's first reaction was disbelief, followed quickly by anger. She accused her parents of lying, insisting that rich people didn't become poor overnight. She demanded to know when this temporary problem would be fixed so she could return to her normal life. When her father explained that they would need to move out of the house within 2 weeks and find a way to support themselves, Isabella laughed hysterically, certain he was playing an elaborate joke. The reality began to sink in when movers arrived to catalog and remove the family's possessions. Isabella watched in horror as strangers handled her designer clothes, jewelry, and electronics, marking everything for auction. She screamed at the workers to stop touching her things, but her parents gently explained that these items no longer belonged to them. The government had the right to sell everything to recover stolen money that her father's business partner had hidden in offshore accounts. Her friends' reactions were swift and brutal. Phone calls went unanswered, party invitations stopped arriving, and social media posts featuring Isabella mysteriously disappeared. The people she had considered her closest companions suddenly became too busy to maintain their friendships. Some were forbidden by their parents from associating with the Montgomery family, while others simply didn't want to be connected to the scandal that dominated local news headlines. The exclusive private school that had welcomed Isabella with open arms quickly changed its tune when tuition payments stopped. The principal, who had once fawned over her father's generous donations, became cold and businesslike when explaining that Isabella could no longer attend classes. Her academic records, mediocre despite the family's influence, would not qualify her for admission to any decent public school without significant remedial work. Moving day arrived with heartbreaking finality. Isabella stood in her empty bedroom, staring at walls that had once displayed expensive artwork and shelves that had held countless luxury items. The silk curtains were gone, the marble surfaces were bare, and even the custom lighting fixtures had been removed. She pressed her face against the window one last time, looking at the swimming pool and tennis court where she had hosted so many parties for friends who no longer knew her name. The family's new home was a tiny two-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood across town. Isabella had never seen such a small living space, and she couldn't understand how 3 people were expected to exist in rooms that were smaller than her former walk-in closet. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors arguing. The appliances were old and unreliable, and the carpet showed stains from previous tenants that no amount of cleaning could remove. Her mother, who had never worked a day in her life, took a job at a department store selling cosmetics. Victoria Montgomery, who had once been featured in society magazines for her elegant fashion sense, now wore a polyester uniform and stood behind a counter for 8 hours a day. She came home exhausted, her feet aching from standing on concrete floors, her hands dry from handling products and cleaning supplies. Isabella's father found work as a night security guard at an office building downtown. Richard Montgomery, who had once commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions, now sat alone in empty buildings, checking locks and monitoring security cameras. The stress of his legal troubles and financial ruin had aged him dramatically, and he spoke little about his daily experiences or future plans. For Isabella, the adjustment was impossible to comprehend. She had no work experience, no practical skills, and no understanding of how ordinary people managed their daily lives. She couldn't cook, clean, do laundry, or even operate basic household appliances. The simplest tasks that her former staff had handled invisibly now seemed like insurmountable challenges that left her frustrated and helpless. Money became a constant source of anxiety and calculation. Isabella's family now budgeted for groceries, compared prices, used coupons, and made decisions based on necessity rather than desire. She watched her mother count coins to buy basic necessities and realized that the amount of money she used to spend on a single lipstick could now feed the family for several days. The final blow came when Isabella learned that her parents expected her to find work to help support the family. At 19, with no education, experience, or skills, her options were extremely limited. The idea of having a job, something she had never considered necessary for someone of her status, now became an urgent requirement for survival. Isabella faced the terrifying reality that she would need to learn how to function in a world where no one cared about her former wealth or status. Isabella's first attempts at finding employment were disasters that revealed just how unprepared she was for the working world. She walked into upscale boutiques expecting managers to recognize her former status and offer her comfortable positions, with flexible schedules. Instead, she encountered suspicious stares and uncomfortable questions about her work history. When asked about her skills, Isabella could only mention her extensive knowledge of designer brands and her experience attending social events. The job interviews were humiliating experiences that shattered Isabella's remaining confidence. Potential. Employers asked her to demonstrate basic computer skills, which she couldn't do beyond social media browsing. They inquired about her ability to handle customer service situations, but Isabella had never been on the serving side of any transaction. When a restaurant manager asked her to carry a heavy tray as a demonstration, she dropped it within 3 steps, spilling water and condiments across the floor. Her appearance worked against her in ways she never expected. Isabella's mannerisms, speech patterns, and expectations screamed privilege to everyone she encountered. Even wearing her mother's borrowed work clothes, she couldn't hide the fact that she had never experienced real hardship or learned to interact with people as equals. Hiring managers sensed that she would struggle to fit in with their existing teams and would likely quit as soon as she found something better. After 2 weeks of rejections, Isabella's desperation grew. She applied for positions she would have considered beneath her notice just months earlier. Cashier at a grocery store, server at a family restaurant, sales associate at a discount clothing chain. Each rejection felt like another step down from her former life, but the family's dwindling savings made finding work an urgent necessity. Her parents' combined income barely covered rent and basic expenses, leaving nothing for emergencies or unexpected costs. The breaking point came when Isabella was turned down for a position at a fast food restaurant. The teenage manager, someone younger than herself, explained that they needed employees who could work efficiently under pressure and handle multiple tasks simultaneously. Isabella's test run behind the counter lasted less than an hour before she became overwhelmed by the pace and complexity of taking orders, handling money, and coordinating with kitchen staff. Walking home from that final rejection, Isabella felt completely defeated. She had burned through her pride, her expectations, and her sense of identity without finding a single employer willing to take a chance on her. The reality of her situation finally hit her with crushing force. She was unemployable in any field that required real skills or experience. Her former life had prepared her for nothing except consuming luxury and expecting others to serve her needs. That evening, while scanning classified ads with growing desperation, Isabella noticed a small listing that caught her attention. A wealthy family was seeking a live-in domestic worker for their estate in the affluent neighborhood where she used to live. The position offered room, board, and a modest salary in exchange for general housekeeping duties. The irony was not lost on her that she might return to her former world, but this time as the help rather than the mistress. The Whitman family lived in a mansion that rivaled Isabella's former home in size and elegance. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman was a stern woman in her 50s who had built her wealth through careful investments and business acquisitions. She had a reputation for being demanding but fair with her employees, expecting perfection but rewarding loyalty and hard work. Her husband traveled frequently for business, leaving her to manage their extensive household and social obligations. During the interview, Mrs. Whitman studied Isabella with sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to see through every attempt at deception. She asked direct questions about Isabella's background, and something in her manner suggested she already knew more about the Montgomery family's situation than she revealed. When Isabella tried to present herself as experienced in household management, Mrs. Whitman's slight smile indicated she wasn't fooled by the performance. The job requirements were extensive and intimidating. Isabella would be responsible for maintaining the cleanliness of 12 rooms, including detailed care of expensive furniture, artwork, and delicate fabrics. She would need to prepare meals, serve guests during dinner parties, manage laundry and dry cleaning, and assist with various household projects as needed. The position required 6 days of work per week, with only Sundays off, and demanded absolute discretion regarding the family's private affairs. Mrs. Whitman explained that previous employees had been terminated for various infractions: theft, gossiping about family business, inadequate cleaning standards, and inability to handle the physical demands of the work. She made it clear that she expected complete professionalism and would not tolerate excuses, tardiness, or substandard performance. The trial period would last 30 days, during which Isabella's every action would be closely monitored and evaluated. Despite the overwhelming nature of the job requirements, Isabella felt she had no choice but to accept the position. Her family's financial situation had become desperate, and this opportunity offered not only income, but also free room and board that would reduce her burden on her parents. She signed the employment contract with trembling hands, knowing she was committing to a complete reversal of her former lifestyle. Her living quarters were a small room in the servants' wing of the house, furnished with basic necessities but lacking any luxury or personal touches. The space was smaller than her former bathroom, with a narrow bed, simple dresser, and tiny window that looked out on the service entrance. Isabella sat on the hard mattress and wondered how she would survive in such cramped, impersonal surroundings. After a lifetime of spacious elegance, the uniform Mrs. Whitman provided was a traditional black dress with white apron, designed for functionality rather than style. Isabella stared at herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the reflection that looked back at her. The girl who had once worn designer gowns to charity galas was now dressed as domestic help, preparing to clean the homes of people who had once been her social equals. On her final evening at her parents' apartment, Isabella's mother helped her pack the few belongings she would be allowed to bring to her new position. Victoria Montgomery's hands shook as she folded her daughter's simple clothes, both women aware that this moment represented a fundamental change in their family's circumstances. Isabella was about to enter a world where she would be invisible, judged only by her ability to scrub floors and serve meals without complaint. As she prepared for sleep on her last night of freedom, Isabella realized that tomorrow would mark the beginning of the most challenging experience of her life. She would need to learn skills she had never considered important, serve people she might have once considered friends, and find dignity in work she had always viewed as beneath her notice, the spoiled girl who had never lifted a finger to help. Others was about to discover what it meant to be truly helpful. Isabella's first day as a domestic worker began at 5:30 in the morning when Mrs. Whitman knocked sharply on her door. Still disoriented from sleeping in the unfamiliar room, Isabella struggled to understand why anyone would wake up before dawn. Mrs. Whitman's crisp voice explained that breakfast needed to be prepared and served by 7, and Isabella had exactly 90 minutes to learn the family's preferences, kitchen procedures, and serving protocols. The kitchen was enormous and intimidating, filled with professional-grade appliances that Isabella had never seen up close. Mrs. Whitman handed her a detailed list of breakfast requirements: fresh orange juice, perfectly scrambled eggs, turkey bacon cooked until crispy but not burned, whole grain toast cut diagonally, and coffee brewed to precise specifications. Isabella stared at the instructions in panic, realizing she had never cooked anything more complex than instant noodles. Her first attempt at scrambling eggs resulted in a rubbery, overcooked mess that stuck to the expensive pan. The bacon burned on one side while remaining raw on the other, filling the kitchen with smoke that set off the fire alarm. Isabella's hands shook as she tried to operate the complex espresso machine, accidentally spraying hot coffee grounds across the pristine countertops. Mrs. Whitman watched the chaos with growing disapproval, her expression becoming more stern with each mistake. The morning's disasters continued when Isabella attempted to serve breakfast in the formal dining room. She had never carried a heavy tray while walking, and her first trip resulted in spilled orange juice across the polished hardwood floor. The crystal glasses she had been instructed to use slipped from her nervous fingers, shattering against the marble table and sending fragments across the expensive carpet. Mrs. Whitman's silence was more frightening than any shouting would have. Bin cleaning became Isabella's next challenge, though she quickly discovered that maintaining a luxury home required skills and knowledge she had never acquired. Each room contained delicate surfaces that required specific cleaning products, and techniques. The antique furniture needed special polish applied in particular directions. The silk curtains required gentle vacuuming with specialized attachments, and the marble floors demanded careful mopping with pH-balanced cleaners. Isabella's attempts at dusting resulted in scratched wood surfaces and water spots on expensive mirrors. She used the wrong cleaning solution on a priceless Persian rug, causing colors to run and fibers to mat together permanently. When she tried to clean the crystal chandelier in the main foyer, several pieces fell and shattered, creating a mess that took hours to clean up safely. Each mistake felt like a fresh humiliation that reminded her how far she had fallen from her former life. The physical demands of the work were brutal for someone who had never exercised beyond occasional yoga classes. Isabella's feet ached from standing and walking on hard floors for hours at a time. Her back hurt from bending to clean low surfaces, her arms grew sore from lifting heavy objects, and her hands became raw from constant contact with cleaning chemicals. By the end of her first week, her entire body protested the unfamiliar exertion. Mrs. Whitman's standards were impossibly high, and she inspected Isabella's work with the thoroughness of a military commander. She ran her finger along baseboards to check for dust, examined mirrors for streaks, and tested furniture surfaces for proper polish. When she found problems, which happened frequently, she would summon Isabella to observe the inadequate work and explain the correct procedure. These teaching moments felt like public executions of Isabella's pride and competence. The most humiliating aspect of her new life was encountering people from her former social circle who now saw her as hired help. When Mrs. Whitman hosted a bake-off dinner party, Isabella recognized several guests as former family friends who had attended events at her parents' home. They looked through her as if she were invisible, their eyes sliding past her black uniform without recognition or acknowledgement. She served them drinks and appetizers while listening to their conversations about mutual acquaintances and upcoming social events. One particularly painful evening, Isabella served dinner to a group that included her former best friend, Sophia, who was now engaged to a wealthy young man from another prominent family. Sophia spoke carelessly about poor people and their inability to understand proper etiquette, never realizing that the silent maid refilling her wine glass had once shared intimate secrets and expensive shopping trips with her. The casual cruelty of Sophia's words cut deeper than any intentional insult could have. Sleep became Isabella's only escape from the daily struggles, but even rest was limited by her demanding schedule. She collapsed into her narrow bed each night with aching muscles and wounded pride, only to wake before sunrise to begin the cycle again. Her small room felt like a prison cell compared to her former spacious suite, and the thin walls meant she could hear every sound from the main house, including late-night parties where guests laughed and celebrated while she lay exhausted from serving them. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part of her new life. Isabella ate her meals alone in the kitchen after the family had finished, surviving on simple food that bore no resemblance to the gourmet cuisine she had once taken for granted. She had no friends among the other household staff, who viewed her with suspicion and resentment, sensing her inexperience and former privilege. They whispered among themselves about her frequent mistakes and obvious unfamiliarity with domestic work. Mrs. Whitman's criticism was constant and detailed, delivered in a calm voice that somehow made it more cutting than shouting would have been. She pointed out every smudge Isabella missed, every corner she failed to clean thoroughly, every protocol she ignored or misunderstood. The corrections were educational but devastating to someone who had never experienced failure or disapproval in her sheltered life. 2 weeks into her employment, Isabella seriously considered quitting despite her family's desperate financial situation. The work was harder than anything she had imagined. The living conditions felt like punishment, and the daily humiliations were destroying what remained of her self-esteem. She called her mother one evening, crying as she described her struggles, but Victoria gently reminded her that they had no other options and encouraged her to persevere. That night, lying in her narrow bed with her hands raw from scrubbing floors, Isabella faced a crucial decision. She could continue feeling sorry for herself and probably get fired within days, or she could find a way to adapt to her new circumstances and learn from her experiences. The spoiled girl who had never faced real challenges was being forced to discover whether she had any strength or resilience beneath her pampered exterior. The turning point came during Isabella's third week, when she accidentally overheard Mrs. Whitman speaking to her husband about terminating her employment. Hidden behind the kitchen door while preparing afternoon tea, Isabella listened as her employer described her numerous mistakes and questioned whether someone so obviously unprepared for domestic work could ever become competent. The words stung, but they also ignited something deep inside Isabella that she had never felt before: determination to prove herself capable of growth and change. That evening, Isabella approached Maria, the senior housekeeper who had worked for the Whitman family for over 15 years. Maria was a quiet woman from Guatemala who had initially viewed Isabella with skepticism and barely concealed disdain. Isabella swallowed her pride and asked for help, admitting that she knew nothing about proper housekeeping and desperately needed guidance. Maria studied her for a long moment before agreeing to provide instruction during their brief breaks between duties. Under Maria's patient but demanding tutelage, Isabella began to learn the intricate skills required for maintaining a luxury household. Maria showed her how to dust antique furniture without damaging delicate finishes, how to clean crystal without leaving streaks, and how to iron expensive fabrics without causing scorch marks. The lessons were practical and precise, covering everything from the proper way to fold fitted sheets to the correct sequence for cleaning a bathroom to professional standards. Isabella's hands, once soft and manicured, became rough and calloused from constant work with cleaning supplies and scrub brushes. She learned to move efficiently through the house, carrying supplies in organized caddies and planning her routes to minimize wasted time and effort. Her body gradually adapted to the physical demands, growing stronger and more resilient with each passing day of intensive labor. The breakfast disasters that had marked her first week slowly gave way to competent meal preparation as Isabella practiced basic cooking skills during her limited free time. She watched cooking videos on her phone, studied recipe books from the kitchen library, and experimented with simple dishes until she could produce consistently acceptable results. Mrs. Whitman began to nod approvingly when Isabella served meals, without spilling or burning anything. More challenging than learning domestic skills was developing the emotional resilience to handle her reduced status in the social hierarchy. Isabella had to train herself to remain invisible during dinner parties, to listen to casual insults about working-class people without reacting, and to serve former acquaintances who treated her as if she had never existed. The psychological adjustment required constant effort and frequent private tears in her small room. A breakthrough moment occurred when Isabella encountered Mrs. Patterson, her mother's former best friend, at one of Mrs. Whitman's bridge parties. Mrs. Patterson recognized Isabella despite her uniform and made cruel comments about how the mighty have fallen, while Isabella served coffee and pastries. Instead of crumbling with embarrassment, Isabella maintained her composure and continued her duties professionally, realizing that her former social circle's opinions no longer had the power to destroy her self-worth. Isabella began to notice details about the household that had been invisible to her during her privileged youth. She observed how Mrs. Whitman managed her extensive social obligations, how she balanced demanding schedules with family responsibilities, and how she treated different employees with varying degrees of respect based on their competence and loyalty. These observations provided Isabella with insights into leadership and management that no expensive education had ever offered. The relationship between Isabella and Mrs. Whitman evolved gradually from employer-employee tensions to something approaching mutual respect. Mrs. Whitman began to offer corrections in a more instructional tone rather than critical disapproval, and she occasionally acknowledged Isabella's improvements with brief praise. When Isabella successfully managed the service for a complex dinner party without major mistakes, Mrs. Whitman's slight smile indicated genuine satisfaction with her progress. Isabella's physical transformation was remarkable. The soft, pampered girl who had never exercised beyond fashion-conscious yoga classes developed lean muscle and genuine stamina from months of intensive physical labor. Her posture improved from carrying heavy trays and maintaining proper service positions. Her hands, though rough from work, became skilled at delicate tasks that required precision and care. She moved with efficiency and purpose rather than the languid grace of someone with unlimited leisure time. More important than physical changes were the psychological shifts occurring within Isabella's worldview. She began to understand the value of honest work and the satisfaction that came from completing difficult tasks successfully. When she finally mastered complex cleaning procedures or received compliments on her cooking, the pride she felt was different from anything she had experienced during her privileged youth. This was achievement earned through effort rather than simply inherited or purchased. Isabella's perspective on money changed dramatically as she learned to appreciate the value of her modest wages. Every dollar represented hours of labor and sacrifice, making even small purchases feel significant and carefully considered. She began to understand why her parents had become so careful with expenses and why her former casual spending had been so wasteful and thoughtless. The designer items she had once considered necessities now seemed like impossible luxuries. Her relationship with her parents evolved as Isabella gained practical skills and emotional maturity. During her weekly phone calls home, she found herself offering advice about budgeting and household management rather than complaining about her circumstances. Victoria and Richard noticed their daughter's growing confidence and practical wisdom, marveling at how adversity had revealed strengths they had never known she possessed. 6 months into her employment, Isabella faced a test that would determine whether her transformation was genuine or merely surface adaptation. Mrs. Whitman announced that she would be hosting the largest social event of the season, a charity fundraiser that would bring together the most prominent families in the city. Isabella would be responsible for coordinating with temporary staff, managing complex service schedules, and ensuring that every detail met Mrs. Whitman's exacting standards. The event would likely include many people from Isabella's former life, including her parents' old friends and her own former social circle. She would need to serve and clean up after people who had once treated her as a social equal, all while maintaining the professional demeanor she had worked so hard to develop. This would be the ultimate test of how completely Isabella had adapted to her new role and identity. The night of the charity fundraiser arrived with all the elegance and grandeur that Isabella remembered from her former life, but now she experienced it from an entirely different perspective. The mansion blazed with lights, flower arrangements, filled every room with sophisticated fragrances, and guests arrived in luxury cars that she had once taken for granted. Isabella watched the familiar ritual of wealth and social status unfold while wearing her crisp black uniform and white apron, feeling strangely at peace with her role in the evening's success. As guests began arriving, Isabella recognized face after face from her previous social circle. Her former classmates appeared in designer gowns and expensive jewelry, accompanied by young men from prominent families who represented suitable matches for wealthy daughters. She served champagne and canapés to people who had once invited her to their parties, noting how they looked through her with the casual blindness of privilege that she now understood from both sides. The evening's most challenging moment came when Isabella's parents arrived as guests of the Whitmans. Victoria and Richard Montgomery had managed to maintain some social connections despite their financial ruin, and Mrs. Whitman had graciously included them on the invitation list. Isabella watched from the kitchen doorway as her parents moved uncomfortably through the crowd, their borrowed formal wear and careful conversation revealing their changed circumstances to anyone observant enough to notice. When Isabella served, her own parents during the cocktail hour, the moment was both heartbreaking and profound. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she recognized her daughter in the serving uniform, but Isabella smiled reassuringly and squeezed her mother's hand, briefly while refilling her glass. Richard looked proud and sad simultaneously, seeing how capable and dignified his daughter had become while mourning the innocence she had lost during their family's transformation. The most surprising encounter of the evening occurred when Sophia, Isabella's former best friend, approached the serving station where Isabella was arranging desserts. For a moment, recognition flickered in Sophia's eyes, but instead of cruel comments or embarrassed silence, she spoke quietly. "Isabella, is that really you?" When Isabella nodded calmly, Sophia's expression shifted to something approaching respect. "You look different, stronger somehow." Isabella simply smiled and offered her a piece of chocolate cake, finding that her former friend's opinion no longer had the power to wound or validate her. Mrs. Whitman's charity fundraiser raised more money than any previous event, and the evening was universally declared a tremendous success. Isabella's coordination of the service staff, attention to detail, and professional demeanor contributed significantly to the smooth execution of the complex event. As guests departed with praise for the exceptional hospitality, Mrs. Whitman found Isabella in the kitchen directing the cleanup efforts and expressed genuine appreciation for her work. The following morning, Mrs. Whitman called Isabella to her private office for what Isabella assumed would be a routine debriefing about the previous evening's event. Instead, Mrs. Whitman offered her a promotion to house manager, a position that would involve supervising other staff members, managing household budgets, and coordinating with outside vendors and service providers. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and private quarters in a better section of the house. Isabella felt overwhelmed by the unexpected opportunity, but she also realized how much she had changed since her first terrifying day in the Whitman household. The scared, incompetent girl who had burned breakfast and broken crystal glasses had been replaced by someone capable of managing complex responsibilities and earning genuine respect through hard work. She accepted the promotion with gratitude, but also with confidence in her ability to succeed in her new role. Her first major decision as house manager was to implement a training program for new domestic workers, drawing from her own painful learning experience to create a more supportive environment for people entering the profession. Isabella remembered how lost and humiliated she had felt during her early days, and she wanted to ensure that future employees received proper guidance and encouragement rather than learning through trial and error. The transformation in Isabella's relationship with her parents was remarkable during their next family dinner together. Instead of the spoiled daughter who had once demanded constant attention and expensive gifts, Isabella had become a mature young woman capable of offering emotional support and practical advice. She helped her parents navigate their new financial reality with budgeting skills she had learned through managing household expenses and small-scale event planning. Isabella's story became somewhat legendary among the wealthy families in their social circle, though the details were often distorted through gossip and speculation. Some people viewed her transformation as an inspiring example of resilience and character development, while others whispered that her fall from grace was a cautionary tale about the temporary nature of wealth and status. Isabella found that she no longer cared about their opinions or judgments. The skills Isabella had acquired through necessity began opening new opportunities she had never considered during her privileged youth. Her experience managing large events and coordinating staff made her valuable to party planning companies and hospitality businesses. Hotel managers who learned about her background and work ethic approached her with job offers that would allow her to build a career in luxury service management. More importantly, Isabella had developed genuine friendships with people she worked alongside, relationships based on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than social status or family wealth. Maria, who had initially viewed her with suspicion, became a trusted mentor and friend who continued teaching Isabella about maintaining dignity and pride regardless of circumstances. The other household staff members gradually accepted her as a colleague rather than an outsider trying to fit into their world. Isabella's romantic life also changed dramatically as she attracted the attention of hardworking men who appreciated her character and capabilities rather than her family's former wealth. A young chef who catered events at the Whitman house began spending time with her during breaks, drawn to her intelligence and work ethic. Their conversations about future plans and shared values felt more genuine than any relationship she had experienced during her superficial social life. 2 years after beginning her employment as a maid, Isabella had saved enough money to help. Her parents moved to a better apartment and contribute to some of their ongoing expenses. The modest amount felt more meaningful than any expensive gift she had ever received or given, representing tangible proof of her ability to support the people she loved through her own efforts and sacrifices. Mrs. Whitman began consulting Isabella about household decisions and even some social planning, valuing her unique perspective as someone who understood both sides of the wealth divide. Isabella's insights about what guests really wanted versus what they claimed to want proved invaluable for hosting successful events that satisfied both practical needs and social expectations. The ultimate measure of Isabella's transformation came when she received an unexpected phone call from her former school's headmaster. A wealthy alumna had established a scholarship fund for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they wanted Isabella to help identify deserving candidates and mentor scholarship recipients. The irony was not lost on Isabella that she had gone from being an undeserving beneficiary of privilege to someone trusted to help others earn opportunities through merit. As Isabella prepared for this new challenge, she reflected on the journey that had taken her from a spoiled, helpless girl to a capable, respected young woman. The loss of her family's wealth had initially felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of her real life. She had discovered strength, resilience, and purpose that no amount of money could have provided during her sheltered youth. Standing in her small but comfortable room, wearing a simple dress she had purchased with her own earned money, Isabella felt richer than she ever had, surrounded by luxury and privilege. She had learned that true wealth came from the ability to create value through work, to build genuine relationships based on character, and to find satisfaction in helping others succeed. The spoiled girl was gone forever, replaced by a woman who understood the difference between having everything and being truly valuable.